Everyone has fantasized about it, walking through walls unnoticed, slipping past guards without a second glance, watching the world without being watched back. Invisibility sounds like the ultimate superpower. But here's what nobody tells you. The most invisible people in history weren't superheroes. They were slaves. And their story is one of the most disturbing warnings ever recorded. And if stories like this are your thing, subscribe to Zedd Talks. We find a new one every week. Deep inside the Ottoman imperial palace in Istanbul, there was a hidden world. Not hidden in some secret chamber, but hidden because the people who lived there had been made invisible on purpose. They were the palace eunuchs, men who had been castrated as boys, stolen from their homelands in Africa and the Caucasus, brought to serve in the most powerful royal court in the world. They cooked the food, they guarded the women's quarters, they carried messages between rooms where no ordinary man could enter. They were everywhere in the palace, and yet, in the eyes of Ottoman society, they barely existed at all. The Ottoman Empire at its height was the most powerful state on earth. It stretched from Hungary to the Persian Gulf, from Algeria to the Crimea. At the center of it all sat the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, an enormous complex of courts and gardens and marble corridors. Thousands of people lived and worked inside its walls, but within that palace was another world entirely, the Harem. The word itself just means forbidden. It was the private quarter of the Sultan's family, his wives, his concubines, his children, his mother. No men, except the Sultan and his sons, were allowed inside, so who ran it? Who enforced order? Who carried out the Sultan's commands when he wasn't present? The eunuchs. Most of them came from Sudan, Ethiopia, and the Horn of Africa, captured during raids, sold by middlemen into a trade that had run for centuries. As children, they underwent a brutal operation, often performed with almost no medical knowledge. Most did not survive it. Those who did were transported north, converted to Islam, given new names, assigned roles in the palace hierarchy. They were stripped of their past, stripped of their identity, stripped of everything that might have made them visible as human beings. And here is where it gets truly unsettling, because the eunuchs were not legally men. Or at least, that was the fiction the empire maintained. They existed in a kind of legal nowhere. They could not own property in the same way. They could not marry. They could not have children. They were not counted as soldiers or civilians or craftsmen or merchants. In official records, they appeared as objects belonging to the palace, not as people, as things. If you're as hooked as I am right now, a like really does help. It tells Zedd Talks you want more of this. But here is the cruel paradox. These invisible men were also, in some cases, among the most powerful people in the empire. The chief black eunuch, called Kizlar Agasi, meaning master of the girls, was one of the three most important figures in the entire Ottoman state. He controlled access to the Sultan. He managed the treasury for the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. He was the intermediary between the Harem and the outside world. He could make or break ministers. He could influence the succession to the throne. He had more real-world power than most kings in Europe. And yet, officially, he did not exist. He had no legal personhood. He was invisible. This is what invisibility actually looks like. Not freedom, not power without accountability. What the eunuchs experienced was a specific, calculated kind of erasure. They were allowed to hold power only because they were considered unthreatening. They could be trusted with secrets because they had no sons, no family to benefit from betrayal. Their invisibility was the condition of their usefulness. The moment they became visible, the moment they were recognized as full human beings, they would have become dangerous. So the system kept them erased. Some eunuchs rose through the ranks, accumulated wealth they could not legally pass on, developed influence they could not legally exercise. They lived in a palace, but owned none of it. They shaped history, but appeared in almost none of it. When they died, their property reverted to the state. Their stories were not told by themselves. We know about them almost entirely through the records of the people who owned them. And when the empire began to modernize in the 19th century, the eunuchs became an embarrassment. They were phased out. The last palace eunuchs were expelled in the early 20th century, scattered without pension or recognition, without a country to return to. Many had spent their entire lives inside a palace they were not permitted to call home. They were freed into a world that had no category for them. The invisibility that had defined them for decades became, in the end, the thing that destroyed them. If this one stayed with you, good. Subscribe to Zedd Talks. There are more stories waiting. Here is what haunts me about all of this. We tend to think of invisibility as the absence of constraint. If nobody can see you, nobody can stop you. But the eunuchs of the Ottoman palace proved the opposite. When a society decides certain people do not count, when it strips away their legal identity and erases their names, those people don't disappear. They are still there, in every corridor, doing the work that holds the whole system together, visible enough to be useful and invisible enough to be disposable. Invisibility is not a superpower. It is what happens to people the world has decided it does not need to see.